or subscribe to my channel. And if you have any requests, go ahead and leave a comment for me. I read all of them, and I love hearing from you. So, thank you so much for your support. And if you're not already, I want you to just find a comfy, cozy was disappointed at the shoe, as the shoe failed to fit any lady's foot. At last they came to Cinderella's house. The ugly sisters were waiting. "Let me try first," cried one, holding out her foot and pushing as hard as she could to squeeze it into her shoe. But however hard she tried, she could not get the shoe on. At last she gave up and laughed at her sister's efforts as she, too, squeezed and pushed to get her foot into the tiny glass shoe. When she had failed, the palace servants asked if there were any more young ladies in the house, at which Cinderella stepped forward. "You," laughed and jeered the ugly sisters. "You are not even at the ball." "The prince wants all young ladies to try," said one of the royal servants sternly. Cinderella put her foot out, and the glass shoe slipped on as though it had been made for her. Then there was a gasp of surprise as Cinderella drew from behind her back a second shoe, which she put on her other foot. The prince came forward and held out his arms, and as the same moment passed, the fairy godmother appeared and touched Cinderella with her wand. Instantly, her ragged clothes changed into beautiful dress, and everyone stared in amazement as Cinderella became the most lovely stranger at the ball. The prince asked Cinderella to marry him, and Cinderella replied that there was nothing